Barb and I. Wally Hooker, Dr. Casey Pickrell, Melissa Donahue, and what we're going to do tonight is these guys are going to recap for about 10-15 minutes, just so they can pick up a little bit from anybody that wasn't here at all, what they talked about. And then after each one of them does it all, then we're going to start the question and answering in the town hall. So we're just going to recap real quick, and we can start with you, Wally.
You mean I have to follow her singing?
Isn't that something? That's tough. That's tough, isn't it?
Thank you. Well, how many of you were here last month and saw my presentation? So there's about a third of you that didn't. So I apologize I didn't bring my PowerPoint back. What I talked about was what we're seeing as practicing embalmers, what we're seeing in the embalming room as we embalm that in the last 20 months presented itself and wasn't there prior to 20 months ago. And that comes at a unique time when something else was rolled out and things began to happen, and I think y'all know what that is, right? So when we started seeing this, it was difficult because there's so many anomalies that we see as we embalm bodies. You're just routinely surprised by what presents itself, but suddenly there were things that weren't normal that continued to happen. And as I was reading online, there was a funeral director in the United Kingdom named John O'Looney. He was the first one who really spoke out about what he was seeing. And he was blaming it on the jab. And then I found another gentleman from Alabama, Richard Hirschman, who was talking out about what he was seeing. He had hooked up with Dr. Jane Ruby and some other folks, and he was on some podcasts, and he was talking about the clots. So we started communicating. We were being interviewed, and then these fact checkers. You know what a fact checker is? It's a paid liar. And if you give me enough time, I can tell you exactly how they've lied about what us embalmers have seen. So as we continue to talk about this, these experts were saying embalmers have always seen blood clots, and we have. We've always seen blood clots, but they were small. They didn't have any kind of structural integrity to them, and by that I mean if we're talking about a red currant jelly clot, they resemble, and you know it'll ruin your breakfast in the morning, but they resemble grape jam. Now imagine taking a stream of grape jam, and try to pick it up with a pair of forceps. What do you think is going to happen? All of a sudden, we're having blood clots that are coming out the size of your little finger, that you could virtually pull them out of the venous system, and they stayed whole. That means they had structural integrity to them that we didn't see prior to that period of time. And so as we talked about it, Richard and I and John were on, I don't know, half a dozen interviews worldwide, and then how many of you have seen Died Suddenly? A few of you. If you haven't seen it, take your time and watch it. Some of it went off the deep end with the embalmers that are on there. We were talking about what we were seeing. And when we talk about what we're seeing, we were told that we're not medical professionals and we're not qualified to say what's normal and what's abnormal. If that car has a flat tire on this side and that one doesn't, do you know the difference between that and that? And if you're not a mechanic, how the hell do you know what's right and what's wrong? That's what this moron that I know. I'm on the board of a mortuary college. He used to be one of our instructors, and he was trying to diminish what we were saying, and he was trying to refute what we were saying. There was no way it could be accurate. But what he failed to remember was, we were seeing it. He said that the bodies we were embalming had laid for days in a cooler, and these clots were forming post-mortem. There's a doctor who's been able to determine with microscopic slides that there's a layer of Zahn, and these white fibrin structures are forming before death. And so we stood our ground and we kept moving forward. But the thing that this guy said, that we're not qualified because we're not medical professionals to know the difference of what's normal and abnormal. I think after 30 years in the embalming room, I qualify for knowing what's normal and what's not normal. And so I talked to this group that we were interacting with, and I said, you know, I don't think these white things are clots. What if we started calling them white fibrin structures? Because they can't argue with we're seeing white fibrin structures because we hadn't seen these before. And so I'm part of the reason we no longer call those blood clots. We call them white fibrin structures. And where's John? John and Jerry Quirk were at my funeral home just a couple of hours ago, and I showed them some clots. The bigger ones I'd sent off for some analysis, but the thing that really concerns me, they came out, they presented themselves after the rollout of the vaccine, right? Then what else happens? Myocarditis, fetal demise in gestating woman from 20 to 24 weeks. It was abnormal. Right here in Tippecanoe County, Dr. Wagner, who does the autopsies, reported that from January 1, 2021 until the end of this year, there was an 800% increase in the cause of death resulting from blood clots. Now, are you paying attention? 800%. Now, in my estimation, as a coroner as well, when we perform an autopsy and we determine that someone died from a blood clot, that's not good enough for me. Where did it form? Why did it form? And how did it form? They're not looking. And you know what the answer is? They don't have the resources or the money to look. And I can promise you, university hospitals, research hospitals, you know, like your Mayo clinics, your Cleveland clinics, Grady Clinic, those kind of hospitals that are so heavily funded by big pharma money and government money, they're not going to go looking because they know what the answer is. And I think it's medical malfeasance. They're allowing people to die, and I don't know what to do about it. People think that us embalmers that are talking out, here's how we were labeled. This one funeral tainer, she's an embalmer, funeral director, she has a podcast. She thinks she's pretty important because she has all these followers, right? She says that we embalmers who are talking out are just seeking notoriety. That we didn't get the attention that doctors and nurses got during the pandemic, that we were overworked, and now we want our free Starbucks coffee and our hour in the sun, which is ludicrous. None of us are trying to sell a book. None of us are being paid to go lecture anywhere. You know what we care about? Keeping you and your loved ones alive. And if just one little thing we're seeing in the embalming room that we can share with medical professionals like Dr. Pickrell that will look at these, maybe we can find the answer. Then would we be bad people? If just what we're seeing by paying attention that could be shared could somehow start saving lives, keeping kids alive, stop them from vaccinating kids.
Amen.
Oh, John, what did you do with that letter I gave you? A lady shared with me a 2-page letter she got, I better not say where, a nursing home not very far from here. And the gist of it was, this administrator is tired, her staff is tired, her medical people are tired, and they want people, when they come in to visit their loved ones, to be masked, wash their hands, and social distance from their loved ones. And they want everyone vaccinated. That if we all work together, and they're all, yeah, would you mind bringing me that? And I'm just going to read it because here's how ludicrous some of the people in our society, they have been. You gave me when we had lunch last fall, you explained these people, they've been not programmed, but She's adopted a phrase, and I want you to all memorize it. When in doubt, set it out. Don't come to the nursing home. Visitation requirements, wear a mask the whole time. Hygiene, social distancing, but on the back, vaccines and boosters have been readily available for some time now, yet several have declined to take the booster. Well, why would you take the booster? Have you watched people drop dead on TV? My buddy, Jerry Quirk over here, we go to church together. At choir practice 2 weeks ago, a local school teacher from Crawfordsville dropped dead. Dropped dead. One of the people in our choir taught with her. And you know what she said? I just can't believe she just dropped dead. She's so young. How could she just drop dead? Where have you been? It's happening every day. I don't know how people can have their heads in the sand, but the long and the short of this was she's pleading. She wants everybody to get the booster. That just makes me mad. But I'll get back on the embalming thing. So, I don't know what else I can add. And I'd just be redundant if I kept talking, but I appreciate that so many of you show up and you have an interest. But you know what's important? If everybody here, if you've listened to anything I've said, what Melissa and Doc will say, share it with someone. If there's 100 people here and you share it with 3 people, that's 300. And tell them to share it with 3 people. Then we're up to 20 at that time. I'm not good in math. That's why I had more than 10 people at a visitation during COVID. I was bad with math. So I'd be glad to answer any of your questions, but these 2 people are way more intelligent than me. I'm simply sharing what I'm seeing in the prep room. We've got one that can tell you what we're seeing and one that's going to tell you how to overcome it. So it's a privilege to share with you, and there you go, Doc.
I knew there would not be a red T-bird in here when I came today. It didn't sell.
It's like a meeting auction here, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to hijack this meeting and turn it over to any people in the audience from the banking industry, because banking is more likely to be a compromise to your health than a virus. Anybody want to the gist of what I said last month was, and I want to start with a disclaimer. It's a perfunctory disclaimer. I'm here as a concerned citizen. I'm not here to provide individual medical advice as I would in an exam room. Please understand that. I spent a fair amount of time talking about the answer to Wally's question about why can't people see this? Why aren't they opening their eyes? And it had to do with censorship. And so I found a Thomas Jefferson quote that gets after what I was trying to convey. In 1785, before the Constitutional Convention had happened, Jefferson was writing back and forth with a colleague of his in Britain, and he said, quote, "You know well that the British government always kept a kind of standing army of news writers who, without any regard to truth, invented and put into the papers whatever might serve the minister," close quote. In 1789, after the Constitutional Convention had happened, Jefferson said in a speech, quote, "Whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government." So I spent a fair amount of time before I got into the core of what I was assigned to talk about last time was the lack of efficacy and the safety concerns of the mRNA products. But I tried to lay some groundwork with regard to the psychological games that were played throughout the pandemic that led to the mass hysteria sort of fear-mongering that made people more vulnerable to misinformation or lacking in curiosity to pursue more information. With regard to efficacy, probably the biggest way to summarize the lack of efficacy in my mind is the fact that even if it was a brilliant scientific pharmacotherapy approach to passive immunity in the human species. It's the way that mRNA works is to trick your cells into making an expired protein. So even if there was a time in the pandemic during the administration of this product where it made sense, it certainly makes no sense now to make your cells make an expired protein that's not a human protein. From a safety standpoint, I think one of the problems with what Wally's talking about is correlation is not causation. I said that repeatedly last month. And so virtually everything you can point to that raises concerns and raises the hair on the back of your neck, the commonality between the virus and its morbidity and mortality and the pathology that it causes in the human body is spike protein induced. And that's how the mRNA vaccine works, is via spike protein. So I think we're always going to have a hard time nailing down causation, and that's the struggle. But in the past, our practice was always a risk-benefit analysis and following the Hippocratic Oath. And where there was question and possible, where correlation might lead to causation, we would take pause, call time out, and stop the experiment. And we're not doing that in current times, and that's the real head scratcher. I think that summarizes it.
Am I on now? Yes. All right. My name is Melissa Donahue. I'm a nurse practitioner, and my husband and I own FFR Health here in Lafayette. Last month I talked about the things that we're seeing post-COVID and post-shot, and some things that you can do to reverse those conditions or improve those conditions. My patient population is highly unvaccinated for COVID, but I do have quite a few people who have had the shot, or multiple of the shot, and so they're very similar. I see a lot of the same things post-COVID and post-shot, and they all revolve around the immune system, inflammation, clotting are the big ones that I am seeing. And so I just went through each body system and the things that we're kind of seeing with each body system. So with regards to the heart, we're seeing inflammation in the heart, we're seeing the blood clotting, we're seeing increased heart attacks and strokes. In the neurologic system, we're seeing headaches, brain fog, strokes, cognitive dysfunction, just some other things like that going on. In the immune system, we're seeing an increase in autoimmune disease. We're seeing alterations of the blood chemistry, and like the white blood cells are sometimes really high or sometimes really low. The platelets are sometimes really high or sometimes really low. And so this literally is affecting every system of the body. And sometimes the symptoms are so vague. It is so hard to pinpoint exactly what is going on. Which that's the thing with inflammation of the immune system. It's hard to just pinpoint that one thing that's going to make it better. For sure, we know that in a lot of cases, ivermectin makes things better. We know that corticosteroids makes things better. There are, despite popular opinion, over 50 medications and supplements that we can use to treat COVID, so you don't end up with long COVID. How about that? And for long haul COVID, we have even more options. There's a lot of testing that we can do that specifically will help to find what this triggered in your system, and then we can target treat that. I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. It's hard. It's very, very hard. I mean, sometimes it's like one step at a time or one lab at a time that we're really trying to improve on, or one symptom. But it's definitely challenging. But most healthcare providers don't even know what tests to do. They don't know what to do about them. Even if they find something, they wouldn't know what to do about it. I'm learning daily how to treat things that I've never seen before in my life. And that is a lot of time and effort that honestly most people they don't have to put into it. Not that I have it, but I do it anyway because people will get messages from me at 3 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning because that's when I'm working, because I'm trying to figure out what to do with my patients, because so many people are so sick with this. So I think that pretty well summarizes what I talked about.
Thank you, guys. That's a recap from last time. We're going to start the town hall now. And the way this is going to work is we're going to pass the mic down the aisle, and you guys can ask your questions. The questions need to be, there's a lot of people here. So to get through everybody, they need to be short and right to the point. And we don't need to tell a story about it if you can just ask the question. And then at the end, we can get a little bit longer, and if we have more time, these guys got some finish-up things they might want to talk about that they didn't get to talk about last time too. So we're gonna start the questions now, and you can direct it to one of them, or you can direct it to the whole panel, and we'll just take and kind of start from front and work to the back, and raise your hands up, and we'll pass the mic around. And we'll ask some questions.
Bob, we did get one that somebody actually wrote down.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to start with that one?
Yeah.
One person played by the rules. So, ooh, I don't know why this is not such a bad view. So this question is from John, and it is, how is this shot process not medical fraud? I've asked the Attorney General. Vaccine, help me out here. He can read Dr.
Vaccine definition.
Vaccine definition changed to exempt this shot as a vaccine several months after being given to the public. I see nothing legal or ethical about this shot. I don't know how they're getting away with it, other than it's the people who have the most money and the people who have the most influence who have decided that this is what we are supposed to be doing as a society. I think truly, if it wasn't those people pushing it, like, none of this would have happened. But we are where we are, and as individuals and healthcare providers, we have to think for ourselves. We have to do our own research. Even though I trust and respect Dr. Pickrell, if he says something, I'm gonna go look it up. And you should do the same for me. Go do your own research. We have done our own research, and a lot of people are not. They're just blindly believing what's on TV. They're blindly believing whatever the guidelines say. Oh, but that's what the FDA, like, we should be able to trust the FDA. We should be able to trust the CDC. Nope, we can't. We just can't. You have to question everything, and I believe that what they've done with this, I do believe it's fraud. I believe that it's a crime against humanity. I just can't, in my head, I cannot imagine how anyone could be okay going to bed at night knowing that they encouraged this.
It's regulatory capture. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt on the front end. Just to play devil's advocate for a second. Fog of war, never let a crisis go to waste. The narrative was set. There were some evil, conniving types that knew they were taking advantage of a crisis, and they laid the groundwork for everybody to be ripe for the picking for, once it was portrayed that this was a vaccine solvable problem, most were going to stick their arm out with whatever came out, because they made it seem so inevitably you were going to die from the virus. So I would leave it at that. I would say it's regulatory capture where the agencies have been compromised in their ethics, and some of them are so they got there so slowly over time, I'm convinced some of them don't even know they're ethically compromised because it's gotten to be the norm of behavior within the three-letter agencies.
Well, you guys have.
Oh, that's over my head. Hold on.
Question?
So, the mRNA technology, I guess, is that the root of the problems with the vaccine? Is it this, the ability for the mRNA to carry the proteins and the additional proteins? Is that where this comes from? Can you elaborate on what is, you think, causing much of this?
Can you guys hear back there?
So,
Just repeat the question real quick.
correct me if I don't get the question correct, is the root of the problem the messenger RNA technology? And I guess I would refine it to, are you asking with regard to its efficacy or its safety or both?
Both. I don't understand it, and I'm hoping you can help clarify.
It is probably the biggest issue, the fact they took a gene therapy technology platform and forced it to become the solution to a problem, because Dr. Fauci and his ilk were hell-bent on making this a vaccine solution to a respiratory pandemic. Unstable, rapidly mutating viruses, particularly once you're in pandemic status, you will never vaccinate your way out of that problem. That's epidemiology 101. It was never going to work, and they forced the issue. They forced it for profit, we can't mind read, but so the safety concerns are definitely derived from the attempted use of messenger RNA to provoke passive immunity in human beings. And I covered last time the concept of Occam's razor, and that is the solution to a problem. The best solution is almost always the simplest one. Why would you pick a solution that has 4 steps when you could pick one that has 1 step? Like in the old days, we'd take a piece of an antigen or a piece of the outside of a virus, make it nice and stable, put it in a human being, and then make antibodies against it. Well, that won't even work for a virus that's rapidly mutating, but I think it's a great question, and it's both from a safety and an efficacy standpoint. The fact that they forced mRNA is the problem, but if they would have used traditional vaccine technology, it wouldn't have worked either, I'm convinced.
In simple terms, doesn't the mRNA help carry protein through your system? And
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. It makes your cells, it codes, the RNA is a genetics code recipe to tell your cell, once it gets in your cell, it hijacks your cell machinery and uses your cell machinery to make a protein that it had no intention of making.
And is this protein, you think, relative to some of the clotting, the composition, I guess, of those clots?
Everything that's been found under a microscope and what Wally suggested is spike protein induced. It's toxic to the cells. It causes a joining of proteins that forms this fibrinous structure that bypasses the normal clotting system.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that the spike protein is the toxin that is in the COVID wild. So why would we be injecting that into our bodies? That's why we see all the clotting with people who have COVID. So that it just doesn't make sense to give ourselves the toxin that we are trying to fight against, I guess.
Thank you. Next.
Similar part of the question.
Stand up.
Is there any research being done on this fibrin structure? As far as as a mortician, do you feel that it is the cause of death, or these fibrin structures that you're finding in the circulatory system? And if so, is there any research being done to find the existence of those before they kill you? And if so, is there going to be anything to fix it if you find it? Those are my questions.
I think I remember them all.
I can repeat them.
No, to begin with, the white fibrin structures don't have blood in them,
Right.
which I find odd. The current jelly clots or the chicken fibrin clots, they'll have evidence of blood with them. I reported what the Tippecanoe County Coroner reported in her report, an 800% increase in the cause of death attributed to blood clots. And I just think it's beyond my ability to understand that they're not looking to try to see where they're coming from. We have sent these white fibrin structures to Dr. Ryan Cole, Mark Adams, Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough was the associate dean, right, at Baylor University. He is one of the most incredibly intelligent vascular surgeons in the world. He was a go-to guy. And you know, because, you can't hear me? So Dr. McCullough took a stand right up front and he said, these vaccines are killing people. This is a problem. You know what they did to him? They stripped him of his credentials to practice at Baylor University. The state licensing board was going to attack him because he didn't have peer review for his findings. Dr. Ryan Cole he has a medical license in both Utah and Washington. He's been called before the Utah licensing board and has, and I haven't heard the results, it should be in now. He had 30 days to answer why he shouldn't be stripped of his license to practice medicine in the state of Utah, simply because they cared enough. And Mark Adams, who is a PhD, and he has a lab where he does examinations, a fact checker found a former employee who said that Mark Cole is rushing things through, he's making things up just so he looks good. So here you've got a guy lying because he got fired. So anytime you get a medical professional, somebody that's willing to stand up and tell the truth, there's going to be somebody out there that CNN, MSNBC, and all of those organizations are going to pay credence to, but yet not pay any attention to those people that are coming up with answers. I don't know if that answered your questions, but it's frustrating to us. And so do I think that those clots are causing death? I do. I definitely do. And what's frustrating to me, I'm just chief deputy coroner in our county. I've been a deputy coroner 26 years. When we were in the midst of this, I told my boss, I'm going to contact the pathologist, I'm going to send him photos of these clots, and I'm going to see what he thinks. So the first thing he said when I sent him the first pictures, he said, those are post-mortem, they're forming after death, because the bodies have laid in refrigeration too long before you embalm them. And I texted him back and said, that's not true. The blood's still warm, the body's still warm when we're embalming these bodies. So you could tell who he voted for. He says, well, it's positional fixation because these people have been incapacitated and they've been laying in bed prior to death. And I said, well, what about the people that were up moving and 20 minutes later they're dead? You know what? Within 30 days, he contacted our coroner. Because I went on to say, when you do an autopsy in Fountain County, if the cause of death is a blood clot, that's not a good answer. You're going to have to tell us how and why it formed. You're going to have to do due diligence and give us an answer. You know what he did? 30 days later, he terminated his contract with us. What does that tell you? They're either too overworked, they're too lazy, they're afraid to step up to the plate and say, this is what's happening, because they don't want to take the wrath of the press for saying what they believe is true.
Yeah, I want to say two things about it. So there's the fibrin structures, and then there's also microclots. So there are little tiny clots that form from the shot. I mean, we've seen that under a microscope, that they're almost immediately after the shot is given, there are little tiny clots that start to form. So that is there are two processes here. both of which can make you very sick or kill you, right? So I think that is something to be said. There are two processes here. And the other thing I just want to add on from what he said earlier is that if you think that we're here because we want some kind of attention about this, that is the exact opposite. You just heard him say that two doctors are getting their license, their entire livelihood challenged. That is real. That is very real. We are not getting paid for this. We are up here risking our licensure, risking our careers because we care about them. because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And it truly, so is this easy? No. But is it the right thing to do? Yes, that's why we're here. And I think that that's really important to know because it is literally I asked our pastor before I engage in any of it, is this okay? Can I do this? Because I do feel like God's protecting us. But every time that we get in front of an audience and say anything, we're at risk. So I just want you guys to understand.
Yeah, it's called cancel culture. Part of the woke culture. And I think that's what's going on now with the mask still being required in medical offices and hospitals when it's been disproven to be effective. Do you agree with that, or?
So the question, as I understand it, is the woke environment is propagating the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, the nail in the coffin for the masking should have been in January. The Cochrane review is the gold standard for in our world. Everything's been turned upside down on its head when you can't trust the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet and all these. The Cochrane review, it was the last one we were clinging to as the gold standard for quote unquote evidence-based practice. And it's to say the editors of that review demand that it's statistically significant, proven in enough trials with enough human beings studied, and they concluded unequivocally that masking made no difference throughout the entire pandemic, full stop. But yet, healthcare facilities are still, hospitals are still using masks. So I think you're correct.
And the CDC, if you look on their website, they actually dropped masking for all hospital facilities this summer. And the hospitals that are still practicing that and the healthcare facilities that are still practicing that are literally they're so afraid of getting sued that they're just acting out of fear at this point. We had to go into a facility not too long ago, and I was like, wait, why do I have to wear a mask for this? The CDC dropped this. I don't even agree with the CDC, but come on, guys. They dropped it. What are you still doing? Well, that's still our policy. I'm like, well, you should really reconsider your policy. That doesn't make any sense.
Joe Biden says the pandemic ends on May 11th, so the masking will probably stop.
Yay, finally.
Next question.
Just take it over top of the people.
That's a lot of cord.
So this is actually for all of you, but I know that the spike virus has caused disease, whether it is from the virus itself, or the spike protein, sorry. It's caused by the virus or the vaccination, because they both give you the spike protein. But is there any, you talked about causation, is there any statistics that are showing that we're actually having more people dying from the vaccination versus the virus itself?
No.
Data will never be kept.
No, I mean, I think the key thing to sit up here is I have to be disciplined to not push it beyond what we know for sure. And this is going to be so hard to prove. You know, intuitively, our intuition could easily allow us to get there to say, now that Wuhan COVID is not in the ecosystem, and the thing that mutates the most as the virus attenuates is that spike protein that sticks out, and the spike is less noxious now, it's less provocative to the immune system. We see that in the clinical presentation of Omicron not being as wicked as the Wuhan strain and Delta. So I think you know, intuitively you could say, since that's not in the ecosystem and the vaccine has been more recently administered, that your question probably leads to the conclusion that the vaccine is more the factor. But I can't say that scientifically.
I'll push it to the limit since Doc can't or won't or shouldn't. As a funeral director, I saw the blatant abuse of using COVID-19 as a cause of death. Blatant disregard. I don't know if the doctors were lazy and it was just easier to put COVID-19 on the top line of a death certificate. Pardon me? Oh, I know, we'll get there. I have so many death certificates where I know why somebody died. Listen, just because you test positive for COVID doesn't mean you have COVID. And when you have somebody with COPD, they have a leg infection, they have a collapsed lung, their kidneys and livers are shutting down. Guess what the cause of death was?
COVID.
Out of St. Vincent's, Indianapolis. COVID-19, and then down under other contributing factors. Everything I just mentioned. And I know too much about this. So the gentleman was in the hospital 35 days. He'd been from the hospital over to rehab, from rehab back to the hospital. His lung collapsed while he was in rehab. They said you have to test him for COVID. They tested him on a Sunday. They moved him Sunday night. He tested positive Monday morning. He died. You die from COVID just being positive? I didn't think so. But it happened all the time. And when I tried to talk out about it, you know what people told me? You're not a doctor. You're not qualified to determine how somebody died. I said, well, the state of Indiana says I can sign a death certificate and I can put anything on there I want to put, as long as it's accurate and I can back it up. And I can't. There was blatant disregard. There was blatant abuse. We were played. It's all about the money, and it's a good thing my wife's 1,100 miles away because she would be going, because it just fires me up to see how we were played. People were dying of COVID. Some did. Yeah, absolutely some did. I don't know, it just infuriates me. Sorry.
I'll comment a little bit. So he's right, we can't say, yes, like the shot's causing more, but I will say I have seen people who have had the shot experience extremely rapid decline in health, kidney failure, liver failure, blah, 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 to the point where they were like ready to die, and then they tested positive for COVID, and that was their cause of death. Okay, so that is definitely a real thing. And the other thing that we know is that COVID, or the shot doesn't prevent you from getting COVID, right? So many people got the shot, and then they got COVID, and then they died later, and but was it the shot that, like the side effects from the shot that killed them, or was it the fact that they got COVID after they had the shot, or was it the COVID that declines their health? I mean, we just can't quantify that. There's no way to nail it down and say, this is it, because it is, you would have to have that randomized controlled trial where you have the unvaccinated and the vaccinated, and then you have to, look at, did you get COVID? So we've got the people who didn't get vaccinated and had COVID, didn't have COVID. Now what are the rates of death? And then the people who had the vaccine and didn't have COVID and had COVID, and what are their rates of, I mean, it's just, there are so many moving pieces that it's really hard to say, that's it.
Well, that's why I was wondering, have they done that data yet?
No.
Can
They're
they
not
even
going
do
to.
that?
And I don't even know how you would, I honestly don't even know how you would do it. Because nearly everybody that's had the shot has had COVID 3 or 4 times since then, so. I've had COVID once, I haven't had the shot, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Don't test, don't know.
Throw out that COVID was here long before they told us it was here. I live in Fountain County on a farm, even though I'm a funeral director. In the fall, late summer of 2019, people were chronically ill. They had respiratory issues that they couldn't shake. They were sick 4 to 6 weeks. And as I think back, prior to we even knew what COVID was, it was there. It was there from late August clear into December. And they blamed it on pollen. They blamed it on the combines were running. There's a lot of dust in the air. People were breathing. It was because they didn't know. You know? So it was here long before we knew it. So why weren't people dying then from COVID? Think about this. Why weren't they dying in that 4-month period when I'm pretty sure it was there? But then all of a sudden they start doing stuff to us and people start dying. Does that make any sense? I'm just a simple old, grew up on a farm and an undertaker and embalmer. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to see it.
Is that tire flat? Go ahead.
Okay, my question is directed to Dr. Pickrell primarily. I've read lots of things, don't know if it's true or not, that doctors are incentivized to push the vaccine, that if they get over a certain percentage of their patients to be vaccinated, that they get pretty large sums of payment. Is that true at your practice, or have you heard of any such thing?
I've not heard that. I think the fraud here is the only fraud that is politically true is the upcoding during the crisis because of the fear of hospitals not having enough resources and being overrun and all the resources that it took to manage COVID. When we saw what happened in New York City, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid made a decision on reimbursement to up the ante, to keep the hospitals from going under, particularly out in the sticks. And so that's all I know from an financial incentive standpoint. I certainly have never been personally told of quotas or told by somebody to push vaccines.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
It's nice to hear the truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it nice to hear the truth?
Yes.
There it is. No CNN. There's the truth.
So Dr. Pickrell's in private practice, I'm in private practice. We don't know what they're doing in the organizations, right? So in the big hospital settings, are the individual providers being incentivized by the organization? We can't speak to that because we're in private practice, right? I will tell you that the American Medical Association, at the very beginning of when the shots were available, so like January to March of 21, came out with a statement that it was considered unethical for any healthcare provider to not encourage their patients to get the shot. And at that time, I mean, it was brand new, we knew nothing about it, and I just remember reading that and being appalled that, if taken to court, the AMA is a big, they're a big player, right? And if they have deemed something unethical, as little old me, I'm gonna have trouble proving otherwise, right? And so to me, that was just a really bold statement against the provider-patient relationship, the provider-patient, our autonomy as providers, that they had deemed it unethical for us to not encourage the shot.
My wife wants to ask a question, but I've learned that I probably need to talk first, real quick, because I've got a quick one. The new treatment that's out there that's being advertised, like I think it's called Paxlovid. You know, those of us that took other treatments got brutalized for it. I mean, what is Paxlovid, and why all of a sudden now is it okay to do a treatment versus the only option is to get the shot, put a mask on, and shut up?
Yeah, Paxlovid is an antiviral. It's called a protease inhibitor, and it works by similar properties of ivermectin, but it's not generic.
Hint, hint.
And it's a Pfizer product, and how many Pfizer ads do you see on TV? And if you get on the Paxlovid website, there's exclusionary criteria still to this day that aren't being followed, and they're pretty tight exclusionary criteria, and they're pretty sick, high-risk patients that were to be the only candidates for Paxlovid when it came out. And I think it's a retail $500 kind of treatment, and ivermectin is $4.
Right.
What's it up to now?
It's about $100 for a treatment. But it was $4.
Yeah, it's
It's got a Tractor Supply, right?
that's a great question.
Just a funny anecdote here. So one of the Pfizer reps actually came into our office not too long ago, and she saw our ivermectin versus Paxlovid sign on the bulletin board in the office, and she actually told us, we said, don't even bother talking to us about that, and she said, don't worry, I won't, and just so you know, I didn't get the shot, I have a religious exemption. That was that speaks volumes right there, doesn't it?
Okay, so this whole topic, like you were saying, Wally, fires me up. People lying and doing it for profit just burns me. So, but this has to do with shots in general. So Melissa is my friend and my physician. She knows how fired up I get about all shots. And so this is not to our personal family, because we won't do any shots ever again as long as we shall live. And if people start digging into them, they see that when you talk about toxicity and toxins, it's actually in every single vaccine. But people have to do the research for themselves. All that to say, my question is, with the current flu shot, I was hearing things that it was like a COVID flu shot mix, like a combo. How is that even possible? Like, are they putting the mRNA in the flu shot now? Or is it like a double shot? What are they giving people? And are they being forthcoming about it? Well, I mean, okay, forthcoming. I don't even know what that word would mean to them, but.
No, the flu shot is the same old technology, because we had to order our flu shot a year in advance. But Dr. Fauci is the third co-author of 3 authors of a paper in January that's curious, and to summarize it, it's an indictment of the lack of success of the influenza vaccine program and vaccines in general. My cynical mind thinks it's a trial balloon to plant the seed for the reason we need to go to the mRNA chassis for annual flu shots in the future. I think that's where they're going with it. But currently, and the way that could work as a combo is the same way that the bivalent works now that they're advertising, and that's where they just simply code for more than one protein, so they cover the same way they do now. They guess which antigens are going to be in the environment, and they put those in there.
Over here?
I was gonna ask.
There it is, okay.
Do any of you believe that this is part of the depopulation agenda?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I don't go that far.
Agenda 2030?
I have an extremely open mind, but it's not in evidence.
It's not dropping dead, not in. Like in remdesivir, like my uncle, they said he had COVID, sent him to the hospital, and the protocol Fauci gave every hospital was remdesivir. It failed the studies, knowing what its death rate was. So they just set everybody up to die.
You're reminding me of an interesting anecdote in history, and I don't want to hog the mic here, but 1917, 1918 Spanish flu. When you read about that and how people died of the Spanish flu, the mortality rate was said to be around 5%. I would argue that they had cleaner statistics gathering mechanisms in 1917, 1918 than we have in this country right now, such that data is probably more believable.